Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, with burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burning Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy. Welcome back, Daylight Burners. Got Lost Cowboy himself back again to shoot the shit, Mr. Jake Zielke. He's in Wyoming this time, so we're I think we got him at home, and between the jet set and gathering stories to write a book, now he's been seems like he's been hopping all over the western United States, filming people singing songs out in the middle of nowhere, and seems like that's been a pretty cool trip too.
Yeah, that's right. That kind of when I had a lot more international travel planned, and then COVID happened and shut that all down, and so I had to figure out something else to do to keep me from losing my mind. So I just worked on the ranch quite a bit, a couple different ranches, but then I had this idea that I just thought all these kind of cowboy musicians and, people that do it now for a living or people that did at one point, I thought they were really underrepresented as far as music stuff goes, because I had so many friends they're too busy working every day to, be marketing themselves as musicians. And so I thought it'd be pretty cool to go just start collecting cowboy songs and people in that way of life.
Heck yeah. Put a CD together someday. Just all the cool stuff that you've people just still do listen to CDs from time to time, but put out an album however, and that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it dang sure would be. That could happen for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw that you went and saw Calamity Cass and record that. I didn't realize that she played and sang till just the other day, and man, she has got a great voice.
She does, and that's kind of what I am looking for is, she's ranching every day and she's the real deal, and music is just kind of a passion, side passion for her. And
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people I love to find and, get some footage of, because otherwise that may never happen.
Yeah. That's kind of the same thought I had with this podcast, is like talk to some of these guys that like we've heard the stories, sitting around the cooler after a Brandon, or sitting around the trailers at a rodeo or whatever, just shooting stories, and some of the old guys will come through and tell you some just awesome, just wicked cool stories that from when they were young, and just like, man, we should record those, and and I've been able to capture a lot of really cool old cowboy conversations on here that I don't think ever would have been recorded had I not done it.
Yeah, you bet. And that kind of stuff is invaluable, really, especially
Yeah.
those old timers stories, like if they're not documented now, you may tell their story a few times, but eventually it might die out. So I think it's a pretty cool way to preserve that.
I know it. I look back at, like we pointed them north, and, some lady took the time to go find Teddy Blue Abbott and just, or I think it was a lady that wrote, or I think it was a lady, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
But she spent all that time with him and just wrote and wrote and wrote, because that was the technology of the time. And, we've got so much cool technology right at our fingertips that, I use it for whatever way we can to preserve some of that stuff,
That's right. I agree. However, whatever medium you have to do it, I think it's worth doing.
I think it's and the good and the bad of the internet is just like, once it's up there, it's up there. Like, it's out it's out into the world, and like you can't ever really properly like shut it down. Like there's somewhere out there, it's there, and and that, I mean, like for good or for bad or for worse, it's always out there, and if somebody tries hard enough, they can find it, and that's also cool because there's how much stuff has just been lost to time that that we don't even know.
That's right. Yeah, you never know. That really, I didn't. This wasn't my plan when I started doing this, but I've had multiple people say since then. They're like, "Man, this is a lot like what Lomax did back in the day, where he rode rode around all these cow camps, and all he did was listen to these cowboy songs, and he didn't record them obviously because it was 150 years ago, but he wrote them down. And so a lot of
Yeah,
these songs, The Man in the Continental Suit, and all these like old cowboy songs that we have now, the only reason they're still around is because Lomax went out and rode around to cow camps and just collected songs from these people, wrote them down. And they've changed over time, and there's different, people sing them a little different here and there, but um, it's somewhat similar to what I'm doing. A lot of the people I shoot videos with, they do end up going and putting out an album or something. But somebody like Cass, she may never do that. So some
yeah.
of the songs that she had, uh, they could go. Who knows if they'd ever be recorded anywhere.
I know. Well, I got her convinced to come to Elko and play on my show. So at least we
Oh,
got
good.
that, and we got your video. So if nothing else, we'll have a little bit on recorded that people can see. So I'm really looking forward to that. Like I said, I didn't know she played until just the other day, and then she started posting song videos of herself playing, and man, she's got a great voice.
Yeah, I heard the way I found out is from guys that, or people in general that had worked with her or done, they'd been around her enough to know that around a campfire she could dang sure pick around the guitar and sing some
Hmm.
songs, but it wasn't, out there for the public. So I've been trying to track her down for months now, and it finally worked out when we were in we both were in Cody, Wyoming for the 4th of July, and
Oh,
so we
nice.
met up and did it there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I've not met her in person yet, but she's a cool chick. I like her.
She is. She's a good one. She's wild.
Yeah,
Good time.
that's what I hear. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having her play at Elko. So that yeah, that stuff like that's really cool because like you said, she's too busy ranching to cowboying to go to town and record anything or play a show or whatnot, and
Right.
yeah, so that's interesting. And it's funny, we kind of got the same. Feel like we're cut from the same cloth because I've got the same idea with podcasting. It's just like go day work with these guys for a weekend or whatever, and then the bunkhouse or the teepee or whatever, set up the mics and shoot the shit and record a show
Yeah.
and like truly capture the working cowboy lifestyle, and because I think it's just neater than hell. I've been around, I've been around a little bit at this point, and I've seen quite a lot of stuff, and there's still nothing like cowboying for a living. Like that's one of the coolest things I've ever come across.
Right. I agree. And there's other guys that I do stuff with, like Kellen Smith would be a good example of that. That Kellen has his music's on Spotify. He's
Mm-hmm.
professionally recorded some stuff, and a lot of people like it. It's been growing fast, and but with somebody like Kellen, I mean, Kellen is still ranching every day, and it's hard for him to get away to play shows. He does, but it takes a lot of. His wife has to help out a lot and pick up
Mm-hmm.
the slack, and so with him, it's not like I was putting anything out there uh, that people couldn't find somewhere else if they really wanted to find it. But what I try to do with people like that is put them in a setting. For example, the stuff I shot with Kellen was on his ranch. He's forget what he is, fifth, sixth generation on that place. It's got an amazing history.
He's up in
And so
Montana, right?
he's in Gillette, right
Oh,
up in
okay.
the northeast corner of Wyoming.
Okay,
But
okay.
he, I think a lot of people also enjoy, even artists that they know. It's cool to see them, not on stage with all the lighting and sound guys and all that stuff. This is just them sitting there with an acoustic guitar playing you
Mhm.
what they'd play around a campfire or after a Brandon or wherever it may be. You get a lot more raw version of them. So that's the other cool part of it. It's not always finding people that people don't know about. Some of it is just kind of exposing already existing artists and showing people this is where they live, this is what they do for a living, and this
Yeah.
is a barn that his grandfather built and it's still standing, and he's going to sit in here and play a song. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really cool too. I mean, like it's neat when you like, because sometimes these musicians are just that they're musicians and nothing else, and they don't have much experience of life outside of just playing music. But like, when say like Corb Lund is a really interesting person. Like, I don't know how much of a cowboy he is, but he's been around it enough that he knows what's going on. And
Hmm.
I don't know how good of a hand he is, but I know he knows what the lifestyle is all about.
Right.
But that guy is just an interesting cat. He knows a lot of shit. He's funny, and he's got some really cool stories. And when I got to talk to him here on my show, it was just an hour of Corb that a lot of people had never heard, and it was really cool.
Right. I agree. Getting to see the other side of musicians that people don't really see. And Corbin's he's done a lot of cool stuff getting back. I think I heard the story of him writing that uh I can't remember which song he wrote, but
90
he was
seconds of your time.
packing. Yeah, that one. I
Yeah,
I saw a video of that and I thought, man, that's what a crazy story.
yeah. I he said it was the first time he'd told it publicly on my show, but I don't know how much I believe that. I think he might have been schmoozing me. I think he might have been showmaning me, but he probably told it before that. But either way, he told it on the show, and it was that's a really cool story. Like, uh even if he embellished it a little bit, like that's a hell of a story, and it's worth writing a song over.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing about songs is I think a lot of times the public can tell whether or not
Hmm.
this person has lived this life, or if that song was written for them, or if that's something that they got the idea off Yellowstone, or they're writing it just because cowboys are cool right now. I mean, there's a lot of that crap
Yeah,
out there, and I mean, it's not very hard to filter through it and see who's the real deal and who's not.
right. And that's I mean, and it's been like that for a while too. Like there's a reason Chris Ledoux was so popular among the rodeo crowd and the cowboy crowd. Same way with Ian Tyson and Dave Stamey. Like, there's you don't hear much of those. Like, Ian Tyson was he kind of transcended just playing cowboy music a little bit more than, but Dave Stamey, you don't hear about him outside of the just like the working cowboy world. He's
Right, exactly.
like he's a niche, but like, and I've heard guys say he's not much of a hand at all, but he's at least been out there and done it. And so like that's what makes his songs so much better.
Right. And I think a lot of the stuff that he writes too, as far as I know, has a lot of historical relevance. You can tell that even
Yeah.
if he wasn't there, a lot of the stuff he writes about historical events or, whatever, maybe they're
Hmm.
fictional characters, but a lot of it is true. And there was a lot of time put into, making sure that made sense and all the facts in it were true.
Oh, he's a hell of a songwriter. I'm gonna be talking to him later this week on the show, so I'm looking forward to picking his brain on writing some, like, cause he's got it's like called Montana Homestead, 1873 or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact name of the song, but that whole album's a bunch of kind of historical songs, and I'm a history nerd, so like that shit's right up my alley.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's sweet. He's a guy that I've still yet to track down and shoot a video with, but it's a bucket list item.
All right. Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I think you should go find him, and I'll forward a number along for you.
Oh, that'd be
I
sweet.
normally don't do that, but I think he's a good fit. It'd be worth it. And yeah, he'd be a cool one. I'm looking forward to talking to him. I've met him in Elko this past year, just very briefly spoke with him, and I'm still trying to get Ramblin' Jack on the show too, and like that's time's running short. You know, he's an old man, so it's
Right.
I'm trying to get that done, but
Yeah, that
I'm
would be
hoping I
sweet.
can. Like, that guy is another one where he's like a Forrest Gump character where he's just seen everything, you know?
Yeah, he's been everywhere, done everything.
Yeah, like him. Boots O'Neill's kind of the same way, you know. Like you think of him just as a Texas rancher, and he is, but that guy's been a lot of different places, and yeah. So I don't know. It's guys like that. I think it's important to get their thoughts and stories down on record, just because they're maybe the overall historical perspective they might get lost in all that, but I think they're important characters, you know, just kind of minor, I guess you'd call them minor characters throughout history, but I think guys like Ramblin' Jack and Boots and you know, like Tom Morehouse and some of these other Lynn Babb and all some of these other characters throughout the cowboy world, I think if we get them on, you know, get some of those stories on record, it's just I think it's important for history, just like that. That's how you preserve how cool it is to go work a horseback all day every day, you know.
That's right. Have you had Gail on your show?
Gail,
Gail Steger?
no, I haven't.
Oh man, that guy, I just met him once in Elko a few years ago, but he uh he told me some really cool stories just in that I think we might have had supper together or maybe had a couple beers in Elko, and he is, I don't know if he still does, but when I was talking to him, he was running a cow camp down on the Spider,
Oh,
uh, down in, I think that's Arizona, and his grandpa actually wrote that song "Tying Knots in the Devil's Tail."
oh no shit.
So yeah, so he Gail is, I don't want to speak for him because this is just from the one interaction we had, but he's got a really cool story, and he's a musician, but also he made a, I guarantee you've seen this movie. There was a there was a documentary made. I think I want to say back in the late '80s about
Mm-hmm.
the Spider Ranch, and gosh, I can't remember the name of that. But Gail made that film actually.
Oh,
It
okay.
and it's really cool. It's like an hour long, and it's pretty low budget. But he documents a year of living on these really remote cow camps out there in the middle of nowhere. But
Yeah.
anyways, cool guy. If you're looking for somebody to get
Oh
on
heck
here, he's
yeah.
one of those old cowboys with a lot of really cool stories.
Hell yeah. I'm always open for that. I don't know about you, but when I was in college, and it kind of still ends up that way today, but I would always, when we'd go out to the bar with all the buddies, I would typically end up at the end of the bar talking to some old guy at the end of the night,
Right.
you know, because like that's how I've always kind of gravitated to just bullshitting with the old fucks, you know, because they've got better stories than I had at the time. You know, I had some crazy stories, but then that, you know, you get to talking to them, you're like, oh yeah, you know, I grew out of that back, you know, 30 years ago, but here's something that happened, you know, and it's, you know, I've always enjoyed talking with the guys that are older than me, and yeah, so I'm always ready to roll on if somebody's got you know, got a suggestion like that, like yeah, shit, yeah, like let's get in touch, let's do this thing.
Yeah, he's that you can learn a whole lot if you just sit around and listen to those old timers talk.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Boots was a little annoyed with me initially, but I just kept calling him every week, every Sunday, and now like we're kind of buddies. And but he's told stories on my show that I know he hadn't told anywhere else, or you hadn't been recorded anywhere else. But it took me like the first 2 or 3 times to get past like his kind of stock standard stories that he's told everybody, like when he's doing events or whatever. And
Right.
but then like talking to him about when he got drafted and went over to Korea, and how that all that whole time period of his life, the only time in his life where he wasn't working a horseback was when he was in Korea in the army. And yeah, I got some really cool stories that he told me. And if I would have stopped calling him, I would have never got those.
That's right. You gotta be persistent sometimes with that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, some guys are more than willing to talk all the time. They'll become your buddy real quick. But the other guys, you kind of got to just like drag a story out of them. And
Right.
and Boots is kind of that way sometimes. Like he's just an old cowboy though. Just he's not used to being around talking to anybody but other cowboys. So it's
Yeah, and some of those old guys, they're just very kind of stoic, and
mm,
they're not super outgoing people that they want everybody to know their story. Now, if you are genuinely interested, they might be willing to tell you some stories. But some people are happy to tell you their stories, but I feel like a lot of those guys are you got to kind of work with them to get it out of them.
yeah. I've and then you got to be persistent on some of them, and sometimes like you got to just stop asking because it's not going to happen. And you don't want to piss a guy off. And but yeah, I don't know. It's a kind of a fine line. You gotta kind of drag it out of them because it's a great story. You've heard it before, so you just want to hear it, so everybody else gets the pleasure of hearing something cool. And yeah, they're pretty reluctant sometimes, but that I don't think that's a bad thing. It's the guy that typically in a crew that talks the least probably knows the most, or they're brand new. Like outside of the brand new guy, the guy that talks the least probably knows a whole lot.
I agree. Couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah, and but then there's also some sure enough hand that just don't ever shut the fuck up either. So it's you got the opposite end of the spectrum, um, but yeah, like there's I don't know, it just like there's a lot of wisdom in those guys that don't talk a whole lot.
Yeah, I agree, and it almost means more when you can,
Yeah,
it's just like soft spoken people. Um, well, either you get steamrolled, or if you're somebody that people want to hear what you have to say, you don't need to speak up to say it. Everybody will get quieter to hear what you have to say because what you have to say is important. And I think the same is true when you say less. And when you finally do pipe up, people are sitting there ready to listen because they want to see what you've got stored up in there.
yeah, yeah. There's definitely a lot of those guys where it's just like just if he speaks up, make sure you're listening because that guy don't talk a whole lot. So it's just yeah. And it, there's also times where there's been a guy that I thought he was one of those. Maybe he was a pretty good hand, but maybe he was just a little bit wiser. But then he spoke up and he had like a real high pitched voice, and it was like it was not a flattering voice. And I'm like, I get why he don't talk much.
Poor bugger.
Yeah, it's like that's unfortunate. Like you ever look at somebody and you just go like, that is really unfortunate.
Right.
I was in Memphis for this past week, and I was at Freedom Fest. It was like a libertarian conservative type convention. I went with with my dad and one of my older sisters. Memphis is a cool town. Have you ever been?
I've never been that far. Well, no, I don't. No, I don't think I've ever been to that part of Tennessee.
Memphis is a fun time. Like it's I don't know what the percentage wise is, but it's one of the blackest cities in America, and it's like right on the Mississippi River. So there's a lot of good seafood and blues music and it is hot and muggy, but man, it's the people are fucking cool. I really enjoyed Memphis, but I forget where I was going with that point, but
My favorite band in the world is from Memphis, Lucero.
Lucero's they're good shit. I like Lucero.
Yeah,
What were we
I'm pretty
talking
sure all
about
those.
before we went off on this tangent?
Unfortunate.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I was at Freedom Fest. Sorry, I don't want to, before I lose it again, but there was this little fella. I mean, I don't know how old he was, but he looked like he was in his like mid 60s, and he looked just kind of like a garden gnome. He was probably 3.5 foot tall, and he had a like a wood cane, long beard, and he had something weird with his feet too. Like one of his feet was really big compared to the rest of him, and and just look at him and just like seemed like he was a cool guy. There was people talking to him all the time. I didn't stop and visit with him, but mostly because I didn't trust myself to not say something really stupid, you know. I wanted to talk to the guy, but also I didn't want to offend him, and I was like, there's probably a good chance I'll just say something that backhanded that I didn't mean in that way, but they take it wrong, and so I avoided him, but I looked at, I was like, that is unfortunate, you know, like especially if he's a cool guy, you're just like, man, that is really unfortunate, but also maybe if he was better, you know, built normal, he might be a douchebag. You never know. Maybe he's a cool guy because of having an unfortunate life, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of times the things that make people the most, unique is the rougher things that have happened to them.
Yeah, yeah, it's wild, but he like I said, he was always talking to somebody when I saw him, but so it seemed like he must have been a pretty nice dude, but just
He's
look
running
at
for
it.
president this next election.
Yeah, I'd vote for him. I'd vote for him. Because I mean, there's a non-zero chance that he could use his cane to summon some sort of magic spell. Worth a vote in my book.
That's right.
He no, I just it was one like just like I had a lot of questions, like I said, but I didn't want to. I really just didn't want to offend the guy, so I just let it be. And I was like, but there, I don't know what all he had going on, but it was not anything that I had seen before, you know. And it's like, yeah, just don't even broach the topic. We'll just keep moving.
That's right. But you probably walk past 1,000 people at that deal that you'll never think of again, and you'll dang sure remember that guy.
Oh, I'll always remember that guy. I sent my wife a picture and said I thought about asking him to come live in your garden. And,
Oh man.
I know it's bad. It's bad. Like I said, I think he was probably a really nice guy, and I feel bad, but I can't not say it. You know, it's funny. Comedy's comedy, man.
That's right.
But yeah, Memphis is a good time. We got to experience some of the touristy part, but we also got to kind of walk around and just down the downtown area and got to see a pretty good chunk of Memphis, and it was cool. I don't care for cities too much, but I like to go visit. And then about a week there, I was there, yeah, just shy of a week, and it was getting time to get on up out of there. You know, I was getting a little claustrophobic.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like being in cities at all, but I do. If you can spend a few days there, it is interesting to see because cities have an entire each one has an entire culture of their own that,
Mm,
and history. I remember thinking that when I was in Mexico City. I mean, I hated being there. I don't know how there's like 50 million people or something in Mexico
that's the
City.
biggest city on earth, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and it is huge, and it's actually built, if I remember right, it's actually built on a dried up lake bed. So it's
Oh, really?
entirely possible that it's a worry that they have that that lake could refill and it would
Oh,
just swamp
jeez.
the city. But
Huh.
being there, I mean that city is basically built on top of like what's it, Aztec ruins
Yeah.
or Mayan? Is it the Mayans or the Aztecs? But
I think
anyways,
the Mayans are a little farther south. I think it's Aztecs that were there in the Mexican, like in the peninsula area, where
yeah,
and
that's
then
probably right.
I think so, and then I think the Mayans were further south, maybe because
Yeah, and
the
that, but
Incas
I
were in
could,
Peru, right?
yeah, the Incas were, and a lot of the Peruvian population is still has like very strong Incan blood in them.
Really?
Uh, yeah, that's why a lot of the Peruvians that I've worked with, um, they look very native. They got
Mm.
very prominent cheekbones and stuff. And they were telling me that I forget what it is. It's like 80 or 90% of the country has a large amount of Incan blood in them.
Hmm. Yeah, because Mexico, there like there's pockets where it's a lot of native, uh, majority native blood, but for the most part, they're pretty intermingled with the Spaniards and the natives. Like they're kind of a
Right.
distinct kind of half breed, I guess.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yep. They're their own melting pot of a different
Mm-hmm.
concoction down there. I just shot a video with a guy. Well, it's probably been a couple months ago now, but his name's Nick Garza. And
Mm-hmm.
Nick is from Texas, and he is a 13th generation Texan, and he actually has the paperwork that I don't know what the ships were called, but they were basically the Spanish version of the Mayflower,
Oh,
and
okay.
his family actually came over and settled Mexico, uh, and they fought at the Alamo. It's like everything that ever happened in Texas history, his family
Huh.
was a part of. But he had that guy could. I sat down and just shot video of him telling stories about his lineage for 25 minutes, and he just barely touched on each event. Like that guy could go for days. It was incredible his history. But so he was technically Mexican, but also Spanish, and
Mm.
had been in Texas forever.
So my on my biological mom's side, I found census records all the way back to 1870 in Herefino, Colorado, or near. Oh shit! Don't go anywhere. Uh, Sorry about that. I was swatting a bug and hit the space bar. But yeah, I found eight all the way back to 1870 census, and I think that was um so that'd have been one like the probably the third census in that part of the world. So it'd have been New Mexico territory at the time. Um,
hmm
and so I'm sure they had been there for at least a century by that point. If they had made it all the way up to southern Colorado from Mexico,
Yeah, no
they'd
doubt.
they'd been there for a hot minute, and so like they were there when it was Spain, probably Spain, and then Mexico, and then finally USA.
Right. They were probably there when it was nothing other than native
Yeah,
land.
it always cracks me up about us guys from west of Kansas that you know like when the whole Civil War debate comes up, we're like, man, we really didn't have a dog in that fight. Everybody out here was just mountain men and Indians. That was the only people out here. There was maybe a handful of ranchers, but not many.
I just actually up in Montana the other day. My buddy from Texas was up visiting, and he called me a Yankee, and I was like, man. Wyoming wasn't even a state when that stuff was going on. Like we're
Yeah.
we ain't Yankees. I don't know. I don't know what you'd call us, but
Yeah.
not that.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, I saw a guy, it's been forever ago, but he had a Colorado native tattoo, and then he also had a Confederate flag tattoo that said the South will rise again. And I'm just like, you're a Colorado native, so, but like, are you first generation Colorado native? Because like Colorado, like there was one battle out in Colorado during the Civil War, or for the, I guess the Union troops came from Colorado, but it was down in New Mexico. There was only one real battle that was west of Kansas during the Civil War. So like, it's hard to say Colorado was like a solid Union territory. Like, now there just wasn't anything there besides Indians and a handful of mountain men.
Yeah, nothing going. People are just trying to survive out here. They don't have time to fight a war.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There wasn't any. I don't even know if they were opposed to slavery, but they couldn't have any slaves out there. They know that they could barely fend for themselves, let alone a human
Right.
that you considered property.
That's right. Yeah, they're out there trapping and hunting.
I mean, I guess the Indians they had a pretty thriving slave trade too, but it's weird, they were non-discriminatory on their slavery. I think that's what gives them more of a pass than the chattel slavery, because they didn't single anybody out. Just if you were not in their tribe, you were fair game to be a slave.
Right. They were essentially like POWs, really.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And you were fair game to be a slave if you were not in that particular tribe. It seemed like there's or allied tribes that, but yeah, they didn't single anybody out.
Right. Yeah.
It was
Very, very different deal.
yeah. I So like, when you were over in Mongolia, did you ever hear about any of like tribal conflict over there, or did they just they just kind of kept to themselves and then intermingled when they'd meet up at a trading post or something?
Yeah, more or less. I never saw it. I did hear. Um, so in I guess so in far west Mongolia, um, there's a group of people called the Kazakhs, and
Yeah.
they speak Kazakh, and they're from Kazakh. That's why it's called Kazakhstan, but I think they were a tribe before that. So
Hmm.
they're a little bit different lineage and speak a different language than the majority of Mongolia. And I had heard that there was, some kind of issues between the two, but I never saw it. I wasn't in that part of the country. So I did see a ton of it though in South Africa,
Oh yeah, I bet. I bet.
because down in South Africa, there's there's 11 official languages, and there's more than that, but that's the official languages. And each, people kind of, if you speak that language, then you're associated with that, group of people. So the biggest group by far, it was the Zulus, and like Nelson Mandela was a Zulu,
Hmm.
and like a lot of famous people were Zulus, but they were part of a tribe. There was a guy named Shaka Zulu that I believe he started up around the Congo, from much further north in
Oh,
Africa,
okay.
and he put together this giant empire, probably the biggest empire Africa's ever seen. And he went down and conquered all the southern part of Africa, and so all these people that are Zulu, they've been there for a very long time, but they're descendants of these Zulu warriors that came from much further north. But there's five, six, seven other tribes, and there was all kinds of not so much warfare, but there definitely was, like, you'd run across guys down there in South Africa that are Probably the youngest ones I saw were in their early to mid 30s, and they would have different guys would have different scars on their cheeks, matching scars on each cheek,
Uh-huh.
and each tribe had their own marking. And so I guess like right before or around apartheid happening down there in the 90s, there was a lot of this tribal warfare where if you were walking down the road and got stopped at a roadblock by the rival tribe, and the only way they knew if you were telling the truth is if you had the right markings. So a lot of
Huh.
older folks down there have these slight different shaped slices in their cheeks, and that was you could tell by that they were born into like a war torn area, that they had to do that to protect themselves.
That's crazy. Um yeah, that's wild. And have you talked to many of like the like special forces, Navy SEAL, anybody in like the special operations community? You
Not
ever
a
talked to
ton. No, I
those?
have. I've been around a few of them, but we've never really talked very much.
I've spoken, at length with a handful of them, and particularly the guys in Afghanistan, and it seems like all those tribes there in that particular part of the world, they all kind of hate each other, and they're all kind of in constant warfare with each other. Or there's a handful of like relatively peaceful tribes, but like they're all just kind of like they don't really they have their code, and like if you accept somebody as a guest, you defend them with your life. But outside of that, like they kind of keep to themselves. And one of the like the huge issues that we had when we went in there and rolled up the Taliban and kicked them out is is now you have a bunch of warring tribal leaders,
Hmm.
scrambling for power. And they were a lot of times they were calling in hits on somebody else for like generations old offenses, that
Right.
and like they had no connection with the Taliban. They're just like their great great grandfather got fucked over by their great great grandfather, so now we're gonna call in a drone strike on you.
Right. That's like that in that movie where those it's about Afghanistan, where there was that special forces unit that ended up using horses to get around
Yeah,
in the mountains there. There's those two, they're, I don't know, warlords, I guess, basically. They're both fighting the Taliban, but they're also not each other's friend. And
yeah,
so I'm sure there was a ton of that happening over there. But no, I would love to sit down and hear stories about some of that stuff, because I really haven't heard much about it.
yeah. It's pretty neat. I talked to I've had Jeremiah Wilburn. Might have seen him on Instagram. He's Jeremiah Blackbeard. He's
Oh, yeah,
um
he's from
uh,
Montana, or lives in Montana.
yeah, yeah. He's got a hellacious mustache right now. Like he's got a mustache that would make Sam Elliott cry, and then he could also murder Sam Elliott very very quickly. But he's a pretty intense guy. Like he's just he just has an intensity about him. That's like it's not uncomfortable, but I could see how people might be uncomfortable because he just I mean when like he's just intense.
Yeah,
And
that's
he's
exactly what I thought about the couple special forces guys I was around. I was like, couldn't really tell if they were, it seems like they're always at a certain level, and it can
yeah,
be
like
scary to some people.
he was joking around and stuff, but like still there's just an intensity about him. It's not like he was over the top or anything, and just like it's more of a feeling than like even a character trait. It's just a feeling you get from being around him. Like, oh, this guy's on it. He's on it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Like I'm sure he's
I
just like constantly scanning, and it's just been ingrained in him, just always looking at
right.
whatever.
I I listened to a podcast with Marcus Luttrell and what's his Kennedy? What's his first name?
Oh, Tim Kennedy.
Tim Kennedy. Yeah, I listened to
Yeah.
them on Marcus Luttrell's podcast, and they were telling a story about something kind of weird happened in Marcus's neighborhood, and his wife was home, and I don't know, but listening to those two guys just like and this is not overseas, this is at home protecting their own houses, and just listen to them have a conversation back and forth about that. They're talking about stuff that is just mind blowing, and they're just like, right, check, yep, got it, and they know, like, they're just to a whole nother level intense, but they're like ready for anything, and I thought that was so cool.
So on that same type of topic, I was listening to I can't remember if it was on the old when he was still on Drinking Bros podcast, or if it was on the Black. I think it had to have been on Drinking Bros podcast, but it was Evan Hafer, the CEO of Black Rifle, and I forget who all was on it, but they were talking about they were in Salt Lake at their their main facility is in Salt Lake, or that's like their first big facility. And it was late at night, working late, and then there was like the camera and the alarms went off, and there was somebody like in the parking lot area or something, and next thing he knew, that poor bastard had like 15 handguns pointed at his face, and they were all by like all held by veterans who had varying levels of PTSD. And it's like you picked the wrong place to try to break into tonight, buddy. Holy shit.
Yeah, no kidding. That is not a smart thing to do.
Yeah, that's one place. I wouldn't recommend trying to rob any of their locations.
You shouldn't even be snooping around, even if you ain't stealing.
No,
nothing.
Just buy your coffee and be gone.
That's right.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. Like, he was, the way he described it. Yeah, there's just like 15 guys just screaming at this poor bastard, and they've all got a Glock trained on him.
Oh man, that's hardcore.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I get those guys a lot, except for the whole getting shot at part. Like, I haven't experienced that part yet, but like a lot of cowboying's the same way. It's a lot of boredom for a large part of the day, and then just like, but you've got to be ready to like go at any point. Some shit might happen, and you got to be ready to go. And then
That's
you just
right.
you don't quit till you're done. Like, when you're done, you're done. Then there's not really a quitting time.
Right. Yep. That's exactly right.
So I don't know. There's a really similar mentality between those two particular communities that I've kind of found out over the years.
Yeah, and I I know that Buster Frierson has worked with quite a few veterans, like helping them. It's a transition from coming back from war into ranching, and
Yeah.
There's another charity up at I think it's a charity up. Or I know that that Jeremiah Blackbeard guy is a part of it, and they specifically place veterans in ranch jobs, but I think they also put them through a camp and stuff, and
Oh,
like
yeah.
kind of, it's like cowboy camp. You learn, because some of
Yeah.
these guys maybe have never even touched a horse,
Right.
so teach them how to saddle, teach them, what happens on a ranch, ethics of what goes on out there. And from my understanding, a lot of them have just gone and thrived in the ranching world after that.
Yeah. I know. I'm not aware of that particular program, but I know there's a couple kind of charity organizations that do something like that, and then I know the one that Jeremiah is really involved with is the same, but it's with battered women, and particularly the Native women. And so
Yeah.
like they do a lot of a lot of search and rescue type stuff with like with Native women, particularly in like the trafficking side of things. And um I say he's an intense guy, but I understand why. Like he's
Yeah.
like he's into some hardcore shit, and if he's not doing that, then he's like training for some crazy race, or he's out packing in the wilderness, and he just he's a cool son bitch. I really like him, and yeah, there's a lot of cool stories, particularly from that. And I want to say like Army Special Forces in particular, because they're more than anybody else in that community, they're tasked with like raising up an indigenous fighting force. So they're some of the most cultured people you'll ever meet in your life, because they have been down in the shit with like whoever they're whatever country they're in. Like they're in with like the poorest of the poor,
Right.
trying to raise up a fighting force, and a lot of times failing while they're doing so. Like they're not set up to succeed a lot of times, it seems like. But like they just have a different view of the world than just about anybody I know.
Yeah, I can imagine
Like
after all,
outside of like
seeing stuff.
missionaries, maybe, like missionaries have that kind of same type of worldview, just from a little different lens, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't know, it's interesting. I haven't been out of the country hardly at all. And when it was just right over the border in Mexico. But even that's a whole different world. Like once you cross that border, it's a whole different world down there.
It dang sure is. Yeah, you gotta. I was talking with a buddy of mine that he's from West Texas, where um, they're pretty close with Mexico, and there's a lot of going back and forth across the border. And he was rodeoing down there, and he had all these guys from up north that they'd come down there and travel with him and rodeo with him, and they're big, tough dudes, and they like to have a little bar fight every now and then. And he was telling them, he said, "Look, you can't do that down here by the border. That's not how things work. That guy might only be 5'5", but we don't fist fight down here. He's gonna kill you if you mess with him." And so that's Mexico
Well,
is
and
even
he's got
more
a
so that
lot of
way.
cousins too. But
Yeah,
like a lot of times they don't need that. They just got a knife and they know how to use it.
yeah. They're not there to have a sporting bar brawl. They're If you
Yeah.
mess with them, they're gonna kill you, and
It's not the
that's
Aussies.
that.
Those Aussies just fucking love to fight. Like
Yeah,
that's just a normal ass Tuesday night for them. Just like, hey mate, you want to fight? All right, let's go.
that's exactly right. I've never seen so many bar fist fights in my life as when I was down there in Australia.
I've never been over there, but I've known, and kind of like the white South Africans are kind of the same way too.
Yeah,
Um, the ones I've been around, they genuinely like to get hit in the face and then hit somebody else in the face, like they just genuinely love it. And
yeah.
I don't mind getting in a scrap if I have to, but I don't care for it, it's not at the top of my list of things to do that particular day.
Right, but there's dang sure guys that's their idea of a fun night out.
Mm, yeah, and those are good guys to be friends with sometimes, but also
That's right.
also they get you drug into some shit too that you don't want to be in. You're like, damn it, my face is gonna hurt tomorrow.
That's right.
That's when it is very beneficial to be a wrestler, or to have some sort of wrestling background at all, because just take it to the ground and just about nobody knows what to do, and then you've got it won.
Yeah, just end it. I was not a great wrestler by any means, but I think that's one of the best foundations you could ever have for just for like self-defense stuff.
Yeah,
Because when I was when I was in Rome, and I walked down to the end of this block where I was staying in the middle of the block, and there was a bunch of people I knew there. I had just met them. It was a hostel. but we were all just hanging out outside, and I ran out of cigarettes because I was smoking at that time. And down at the end of the block was in Europe, they've got cigarette vending machines everywhere. So I walked
How's
down.
the chew situation over there? Probably none, huh?
There's none. Some of those Scandinavian countries will, like in Sweden, a lot of those guys chewed like pouches
Yeah.
or like zins kind of.
Yeah.
But that's why I've never smoked other than when I go travel and run out of chew. I switch
Yeah.
over to smoking until I get back, and then I quit right away. But so that was why I was smoking in Italy. But I went down to the end of the block, got my cigarettes, and then these two local guys that spoke a little bit of English came up to me, and it was a kind of a dark corner where nobody could see us, and uh, they're like, "Oh, they're trying to be friendly, but they're like, "Let me show you this trick." And the guy comes up and puts his arm around me, and I immediately didn't like that, but he was saying he was going to show me something, and as I took a step, he stuck his one of his legs in between mine as I stepped forward, and
Uh,
I just instantly went to wrestling because I could tell, like, if he made one move, I was off balance, and so
yeah.
I immediately dropped my center of gravity and double legged that dude and dumped him on the sidewalk, and just ran back to the people that I knew. But I think that came from wrestling. Just immediately, when you're off balance and you got to
Yeah.
get lower.
Yeah. It was funny. I when I was living up in Montana, we went to the bar in Cleveland. I don't know if you know where that's at, but it's
Mm-mm.
uh there's a church and a bar and a post office, and the bar and the post office are in the same building, but they just got a dividing wall. Um and I'd almost gotten a fight in Haver the weekend before, and I didn't try to. Like I don't I genuinely like there's only been a handful of times in my life where I've been itching for a fight and actually try to pick a fight. And Montana was not the place for that. I like those people up there kind of like to fight too, it seems like. Um but this little fucker, um it was funny. He like kept trying to get me to fight and I didn't want to. And finally he blew smoke in my face twice in a row after I told him not to. And so then I pushed him, and he was real drunk, and so he like cartwheeled over the pool table, broke a window. But then he came up style, and like he tried to take me down, so I just sprawled and then hit him in the gut a couple times. And he was a little bitty fella, so I kind of felt bad. I was like I could really hurt this guy if I keep going. So I just kind of laid on him until he gave up. But yeah, same thing. It was just like any sort any sort of wrestling practice at all that you've had in your background, like it just drilled in your head to just sprawl
Yep.
sprawl or the takedown either way. And that's such a valuable thing in a street fight, because like you get in close, they might hit you, but you take them down, and most of the time those guys don't know what the fuck to do. And yeah, then you've got it won. Unless they know jujitsu, and then you're fucked. But
Or unless they got a buddy there that'll kick you in the ribs.
yeah, that too. Yeah. That yeah, you kind of gotta be prepared for all that shit in the street fight. And yeah, and people don't fight fair if there's not a referee around.
Right. Yeah. Then you're just defending yourself at that point.
Yeah. But yeah, I think wrestling's it's a good base. But also, like if you're not very good at wrestling, you know how much it sucks when you can't when you can't control anything that's being done to you. You're just like you're helpless. No matter how hard you struggle, you're just getting wallered. You know that's such a miserable feeling.
Right. Those guys in Mongolia, their national sport is wrestling, and
Yeah,
they take it super serious. But what they call wrestling is it's way more. It's not like American traditional wrestling. It's I think it's much closer to like judo because
yeah,
it has nothing to do with being on the ground. It's all about takedowns, and then once the person's on the ground, it's over. So
Oh yeah.
you learn the throws and like how to control somebody standing
Mm-hmm.
up. But I think you can drop to a knee. I don't even know if you can drop to a knee for a takedown on somebody else. So it's like as soon as anything other than their hand touches the ground, it's over. But those guys, man, when I was over there, every guy was ready to wrestle like at the drop of a hat. And they were
That's
happy
crazy.
to. They just loved
Yeah,
doing it.
that's crazy. So I'm guessing wrist control is a huge thing in their style of wrestling.
Yeah, that's pretty much it is wrist control or they would get you, it would be like in judo, like if somebody gets a hold of your gi right up on your chest.
Yeah.
That was another like hold that they used a lot where they'd get a hold of your shirt collar, but it's basically
And then
wrist or shirt collar, and if you lose
yeah, and
either one
then
of those, you're done.
yeah, and so they get your collar, then you just shift your hips and you're thrown.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly.
yeah. Huh. Interesting. That's I act like I know what I'm talking about. I've watched it a lot, but I also wasn't that good at wrestling either. I was I was almost good enough to make it to state, but not quite.
Yeah, those were back in the day. I don't know, but it dang
Mm,
sure sticks with you. It sticks with you for
mm.
forever.
That muscle memory is ingrained. That just the drop in your hips. That like that's such a that's why like you can never have a like a pure contest between MMA and boxing because there is no level change in boxing, like it's all footwork and fists. But like
Exactly.
yeah, like Francis Ngannou he's gonna box Tyson Fury, which I imagine Tyson Fury will box him up, but I don't know. You never know. Francis Ngannou is a terrifying individual. That guy he has to cut weight to hit the 265 weight limit.
Right. Yeah,
He's a monster.
that did not I guess Conor McGregor kind of held his own, but it didn't go well for him. But so
No,
I
he
was
landed
thinking,
a
I just thought like, who wants to see that again? But if there was going to be a guy, I think Ngannou is probably the guy.
I think so because I mean he's probably gonna get outclassed, but he can take you out with one punch. That's there's no joke in those hands. Like that dude is frightening. But if it was an MMA match, all he'd have to do is grab one wrist and and then it's a whole nother fight.
Oh yeah,
that's a completely different fight. If he can change levels or grab your wrist and pull you around, like hey, your footwork only does so much until they're up close and they got hands on you.
yeah, that would be over in the first round if it was MMA.
Yeah, I think so. And unless just Fury was just good enough to keep him, out on the perimeter, but I don't think so. Without some leg kicks or something, and Ngannou's got a chin too, so he could eat a couple on the way in, and then yeah, then it's kind of over.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm excited to see that fight. That'll be cool.
I know. I really wish Ngannou the UFC though. I want to see him and John Jones. Like that's the fight I want to see. John Jones made old Cyril Gahn look like a bitch. I mean that was over so fast.
Yeah, and I think it's so unfortunate now that like there's so much behind the scenes stuff going on in the fight game now, and
Mm,
I mean it's part of making money and it's part of building something, but like you know the fact that those two guys can't fight because of a contract, I think is just
yeah,
dumb.
I know, and especially like I get from the businessman perspective, like they've built the UFC into bigger than boxing at this point, but the fighters don't get paid anywhere near that, but they've been able to do that by keeping their fighter pay low, but like it's a guy like Ngannou. I mean, that's a guy you want to watch fight over and over and over. Just pay the man. Don't
Yeah,
deprive us of John Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Like that. That's the fight we want to see. Is
and
Jones is he true? I think he is, but I want to see that fight.
yeah, me too. And Ngannou also has one of the coolest stories you'll ever hear about
Oh
an
yeah.
MMA fighter, like where he came from. Just that alone is people automatically love him just because of what he had to go through to get to where he is.
Well, and then once he got to the UFC, he had same thing. Like he was a wrecking ball until he ran into Stipe, and Stipe starched him, and then he was kind of on a slide for a minute, and then all of a sudden he got back on it. He quit fucking around, and then when he went to fight Cyril Gahn, then all of a sudden he like takes him down and grapples with him. You're like, oh fuck, that big bastard can now grapple too. Like
Yeah,
that dude is truly terrifying, you know? Like that's a guy you don't ever want to meet in a back alley. Because he just
no,
literally tear you limb from limb and
absolutely.
skillfully.
Yeah, he would.
Yeah, I want to see that fight though, John Jones and Francis, but I don't know if it'll ever happen. I guess it's Jones and Stipe's coming up. That'll be a good fight. I want to see what Stipe can do, but I mean, he's I guess he lost to Ngannou last. That was his last fight, wasn't it?
I think so. I don't follow that stuff super close.
I was I've been following it a little closer here the last couple of years, but I think Stipe, yeah, because he beat Cormier for the heavyweight title. It was he beat him the last two times, and then I think he lost to Ngannou, and I don't think he's fought since then. So now he's gonna fight John Jones for the title, and
What a comeback fight. That'd be
yeah,
tough.
if he manages to pull that off, that's like I've always thought Stipe is an underrated guy. He's not flashy, so he doesn't get the headlines, but he's a hell of a fighter, and if he beats Jones, man, that's that'll throw everything in a mix. You know, I don't see it happening, but it could.
Yeah, I mean, crazy stuff happens in the MMA. You never know.
I know, like yeah, you just got to be off a little bit, and somebody can capitalize on it, and either choked out or you're getting your head wrapped around itself.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh well, let's see. We're at hour 10. Um, you got about another half hour in you.
Yeah, yep.
All right, cool. I'm gonna use the restroom, but tell everybody where they can find all your stuff, find your book, your music videos, everything, and then we'll come back for a little bonus episode on Patreon.
Sure. You can find me, thelostcowboy.com is my website. My book's on there. It's also, you can just search The Lost Cowboy on Amazon. Should pop right up. As of right now, it's got the bestseller tag, so it's doing better than I ever imagined.
Does it
On
really?
and then, yeah, it's the bestseller in its category right now. So,
Hell yeah,
um,
that's awesome.
so
That's
yeah, it's on Amazon's the quickest way to get it, or come out to a book signing. I've been doing a bunch of them. They're mostly for the rest of the summer. It's going to be in Wyoming, so that's in and around Wyoming. So I'll be around there. But and then as far as social media, the place I'm most active is Instagram, and you can find me the Lost Cowboy there. Also, if you're interested in any of the music stuff, that's called Dusty Vaquero on YouTube and Instagram both. Um, so you can check that out. I put out a video every Wednesday on Dusty Vaquero of a new musician. So all of that stuff.
star so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horse is kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Is just a gather, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.